He was not barking at the tree. He was warning whatever the tree had chosen to keep. The call comes in just after 5:30 p.m., when the last of the October light is draining out of Ash Hollow, and the hills beyond town are turning the color of cold iron. Officer Ethan Walker eases his cruiser onto a narrow dirt road that winds past a stretch of forgotten pasture and half-dead fence posts, with Rex steady in the back, silent in the way that always means he is already working. The report is nothing unusual on paper, just a neighbor claiming she heard strange scratching near the old Burnham property, the kind of thing that usually turns out to be a raccoon, a possum, or loose tin shifting in the wind. But the minute Ethan opens the door, he feels it. The air is wrong. Too still. Too close. It carries the damp smell of moss, split bark, and wet earth, with something older beneath it, something like rust left out in the rain for years. Rex jumps down first, 100 pounds of black and tan discipline and instinct, his paws landing soft on the leaf-covered ground. He does not pull ahead. He does not pace. He moves in a slow, deliberate line through the weeds as if following a path no human eye can see. Ethan watches the dog's shoulders tighten under his coat. In 6 years together, he has learned that Rex only has 3 real warnings. The first is restlessness. The second is stillness. The third is the bark that comes after both. Ahead of them, about 30 feet off the road, stands an old white oak, massive and bent with age, its branches reaching over the property like dark arms held open against the dying sky. Ethan notices the growth on it before Rex stops. It bulges from the trunk at chest height, huge and misshapen, wider than a basketball, like the tree grew around a wound and never healed right. The bark over it is darker than the rest, knotted and uneven, and one side has split just enough to reveal a seam of shadow inside. Rex freezes. Every muscle in his body locks at once. Then, very slowly, the fur along his spine rises. Ethan feels the shift in his own chest. Not fear exactly. Recognition. The kind that comes before fear has a name. Rex takes one step closer to the tree, lowers his head, and lets out a single bark that cracks through the quiet so sharply it seems to wake the field itself. Somewhere far off, a crow lifts out of the brush. Then there is silence again. No wind. No insects. No creaking branches. Just the sound of Ethan's own breathing and the faint scrape of Rex's nails as the dog circles the trunk once and returns to the same spot. The same spot every time. Ethan moves closer, boots sinking half an inch into the soft ground, flashlight in hand though there is still a little light left. He does not touch the growth yet. He only studies it, the way the bark swells around it, the way the split runs too clean for natural rot, the way Rex stares not at the tree itself but at that dark seam as if something inside it might be staring back. Ethan swallows and feels the temperature drop against his skin. Trees do not keep secrets, he tells himself. They only grow over them. But standing there with dusk settling over the field and Rex refusing to back away, that old oak does not feel like part of the land anymore. It feels like a witness. Ethan does not believe in haunted places, but he does believe that land remembers. He keeps his light on the growth a moment longer, then shifts the beam across the rest of the property, taking in what little the dusk will still give him. The Burnham place sits on nearly 4 acres at the edge of Ash Hollow, where the town thins into timber and low hills and the roads turn from pavement to gravel, and then to dirt if you keep going long enough. 12 years earlier, there had been a house here, a red farmhouse with a wraparound porch and a small white barn out back. Ethan remembers it only in pieces because he was new to the county then, a patrol deputy trying to learn roads, names, and the weather moods of western Montana. By the time he first saw the place, it had already been reduced to a blackened foundation, a few stone steps, and a chimney standing alone in the weeds like something too stubborn to fall. The fire had been blamed on faulty wiring. The family left. The file was closed. The years did what years always do in small towns. They covered the rough edges with routine and let memory grow quiet. Now all that remains are the bones of things. A bent mailbox with no number on it. Fence rails silvered by rain and age. A rusted windmill that has not turned in years. Tall grass brushing against Ethan's knees. Above it all, the old oak holding its place near where the front walk used to be, as if it had been assigned the job of staying. Rex gives a low sound in his throat, not a growl this time, more a warning breathe through his chest, and Ethan glances down. The dog has not taken his eyes off the trunk. That unsettles him more than the tree itself. Rex is trained to track movement, scent, fresh disturbance, anything living or recently changed. But what he is doing now feels different. It feels patient. Intentional. Ethan steps back and touches the radio clip to his shoulder. He keeps his voice level, because that is what training does for a man, even when the back of his neck has gone cold. He tells dispatch he is at the Burnham property, and asks them to log him on scene longer than expected. He does not say why. Not yet. There is a pause, then the dispatcher, a woman named Kelly who has known him since high school, answers with a lightness that does not quite hide curiosity. She asks if the old place is giving him trouble. Ethan looks at the oak again, at the dark seam running through the bulging bark, and says only that Rex found something worth a second look. When the radio clicks off, the silence returns, thicker than before. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a creek moves over stones with that soft, steady sound water makes when nobody is listening. A faint smell of chimney smoke drifts in from a house half a mile down the road. The temperature has dropped at least 10 degrees since he pulled in. October in Montana does that. 1 minute the air tastes like dry leaves and sun-warmed dirt. The next it slips a knife of cold between your shoulders and reminds you winter is never far away. Ethan sweeps the flashlight toward the ground around the oak. No fresh digging. No boot prints except his own. No beer cans, no wrappers, no sign that teenagers had been out here daring each other after dark the way kids in Ash Hollow always do when a place gets a reputation. And the Burnham place does have one. Not officially. Small towns do not put their ghost stories in writing. But people talk. They say this property went too quiet after the fire. They say birds do not nest in the oak anymore. They say on windless evenings you can hear tapping from the far side of the field, though there is nothing left there to make a sound. Ethan has rolled his eyes at talk like that more than once. Even now, part of him wants an ordinary answer. A length of pipe swallowed by bark. An old toolbox wedged in a hollow. Something explainable. Something dull. But Rex lifts one paw, sets it down carefully, and leans toward the trunk with a kind of reverence Ethan has only seen around graves and hospital beds. That is when he realizes the most unsettling thing about the place is not that it feels abandoned. It is that it feels watched, as if whatever was left here never really left at all. Ethan has worked enough back roads to know the difference between a dog following scent and a dog resisting it. What Rex does now is either. He does not lower his nose to the grass and sweep for a trail. He does not circle wide the way he would for a missing hiker or a wounded deer. He ignores the ground completely, as if the earth has nothing to tell him tonight. All his focus stays fixed on that swelling in the trunk, that dark, unnatural knot where bark and shadow seem to have grown together over the years into something heavy and sealed. Ethan moves closer until he is standing within arm's reach of the oak. Up close, the growth looks worse. It is not smooth the way tree burl usually is. It is ridged and uneven, with old scars in the bark that twist around it like fingers trying to hold something shut. A bead of moisture glistens near the split seam, though the rest of the trunk is dry. Ethan angles the flashlight and sees the faintest dull shine deep inside the crack, not enough to identify, just enough to bother him. Rex steps in immediately, placing himself beside Ethan's leg, shoulder pressed lightly against his knee. It is a move he has made before in narrow ravines, during storm searches, and once outside a collapsed hunting cabin when the floor was too weak to trust. Be careful, it says without sound. Ethan exhales slowly and crouches. The smell near the trunk is stronger here. Wet wood. Sap gone sour with age. A trace of something metallic under it all, thin but unmistakable, like an old toolbox opened after a long winter in the shed. He reaches out with the back of his fingers first, then pauses. The bark should feel cool in this weather, but not cold. There is a difference. Cold belongs to metal, stone, deep water, the inside of places sun has not touched in years. He tells himself that is nonsense, and places his hand against the swelling anyway. The sensation shoots through him at once. Not pain. Not even fear. Just a sharp jolt of touching something that does not belong where it is. The outer bark is rough, damp, and ordinary enough. But beneath that thin living layer there is a firmness that does not yield like wood. It is too dense. Too clean beneath the surface. Ethan presses a little harder and feels the outline of something straight under the curve, something with an edge where there should be none. Trees grow around nails, fence wire, horseshoes. He knows that. But this is bigger. Purposeful. Hidden, not lost. Rex gives that same low sound again, and then does something Ethan has never seen him do on a tree search. He lifts one paw and places it gently on the trunk, right below the seam, then looks up at Ethan with his amber eyes wide and steady. Not frantic. Not afraid. Certain. Ethan feels the evening tighten around them. The sky above the field has darkened to bruised blue, and the first real cold of night is beginning to settle into the grass. He stands and takes 2 slow steps back, studying the height of the growth, the angle of the split, the old oak roots disappearing into the earth where the Burnham front walk used to run. Nothing about it lines up with accident. Nothing about Rex's behavior says animal remains or a hollow nest or storm damage. This is the part that unsettles Ethan most. Dogs live close to truth. They do not dress it up. They do not invent mystery for the sake of it. If Rex is refusing the ground and choosing the trunk, then whatever matters here is not buried under their feet. It is inside the tree itself, waiting like a secret that has run out of years. The sound comes so softly at first that Ethan mistakes it for wind moving through the dead grass, but there is no wind tonight. It is a voice. Thin with age, sharpened by caution. You should not cut into that tree after sundown. Ethan turns at once, flashlight swinging toward the edge of the property where the dirt road bends around a stand of cottonwoods. A woman stands there in the fading light, one hand wrapped around a grocery sack, the other resting on the top of a cane polished smooth by years of use. She is small and narrow-shouldered, with a long brown coat buttoned to the throat and silver hair pinned back from a face lined by weather, grief, and the kind of silence that settles into people who have outlived too many explanations. Ethan lowers the beam so it does not hit her eyes. He recognizes her after a second. Martha Vale. 78. Lives alone in the white clapboard house half a mile down the road, keeps a vegetable garden even into early frost, comes into town every Thursday for canned peaches, lamp oil, and dog biscuits she claims are for strays no one has ever seen. Rex turns toward her, alert but calm. He does not bark. He studies her the way he studies doors before they open. Martha steps closer, boots whispering through the grass, and the sack in her arm gives off the faint smell of apples and coffee. Her gaze never lands on Ethan first. It goes straight to the oak, then to the split seam in the growth, and Ethan watches something in her face change. Not surprise. Recognition. Her mouth tightens. The hand on her cane trembles once and stills. Ma'am, Ethan says gently, this your property? Martha shakes her head. Has not been anybody's for years. Her eyes remain fixed on the trunk. But I knew the people who lived here before the fire. Knew the little girl too. The field seems to draw tighter around them. Ethan says. Nothing. He has learned that when memory rises on its own, the best thing a man can do is not frighten it away. Martha takes another slow step forward. The cold has put color into her cheeks, but the rest of her has gone almost pale. That tree was healthy once, she says. Straight trunk. Strong limbs. My husband used to say it would outlive all of us. She swallows and lifts her chin toward the swelling in the bark. Then after the fire, it changed. Grew around something, or over something. I do not know which. Only that it happened too fast. Ethan glances back at the trunk. Too fast how? Martha lets out a breath that clouds silver in the air. By spring it had that bulge. By the next fall, it was twice the size. Folks said fire can do strange things to old wood. I let them say it. She presses her lips together, and for a moment Ethan thinks she is done. Then she looks at him properly for the first time, and there is a plea in her eyes that feels older than fear. Officer Walker, some things in this town were buried by paperwork long before the ground ever took them. People wanted peace more than truth. They always do. Rex shifts beside the oak and gives one short bark, as if he cannot stand the slow pace of human hesitation. Martha flinches at the sound. Her gaze drops to the dog, then returns to the tree. He knows, she whispers. I could tell the minute I saw him standing here. He knows there is something inside. Ethan feels the night deepen around the three of them, the last daylight thinning behind the hills, the smell of damp bark and old secrets hanging in the air. What do you know about this tree, Martha? He asks quietly. She stares at the swelling for so long that the silence begins to sound like an answer. When she finally speaks, her voice is barely more than breath. Only this. After the fire, I heard tapping from the trunk for 3 nights. And on the 4th morning, that growth had begun. Ethan does not answer right away. He stands beneath the oak with Martha's words settling over him like the first hard frost, thin at first, then everywhere. 3 nights of tapping. A growth that came too fast. A town that chose quiet over questions. None of it belongs in an ordinary call log, and yet the thing in front of him is not ordinary. It is solid beneath the bark. It reflects light from inside a seam that should not be there. And Rex, who has spent years teaching Ethan the difference between instinct and alarm, is telling him with every line of his body that this is not a place to rush. Ethan reaches for the radio again and calls for a supervisor on scene. His voice stays even, but lower now, as if the field itself is listening. Dispatch tells him Sheriff Nora Blake is 10 minutes out. Ethan thanks her, clips the radio back to his shoulder, and keeps his eyes on the trunk. 10 minutes in daylight is nothing. 10 minutes at the edge of something hidden can feel like a mile of winter road. Martha shifts her grocery sack to the crook of her arm and steps back from the tree, but she does not leave. She looks as though she has spent years waiting for somebody to ask the right question in the right place, and now that it has happened, she is not sure whether to be relieved or afraid. The smell of apples drifts from the paper sack every time she moves. It mixes strangely with the scent of damp bark and cold sap. Rex inches closer to the growth again, head low, ears forward. Ethan studies the split in the bark and notices something he missed before. Near the lower edge of the seam, buried beneath a thin skin of wood, there is a line too straight to be natural. It is no wider than a fingernail, dark at first, then silver when the flashlight catches it just right. Metal. Old, weathered, but still metal. Ethan's pulse kicks once against his throat. He unclips the folding utility knife from his belt, opens it, and brings the blade to the outer bark with deliberate care. The moment the tip touches the seam, Rex lets out a sound so sharp and sudden that Ethan stops at once. It is not a bark meant for distance. It is close and urgent, the kind of warning that belongs to unstable ice, weak flooring, a rattlesnake under a porch step. Rex moves fast, stepping in front of Ethan and planting himself between the man and the trunk. His chest is lifted, tail rigid, amber eyes locked not on Ethan now, but on the place where the blade almost entered. Ethan has seen Rex intercept danger before. Never like this. Not with hesitation. With conviction. All right, Ethan says softly, lowering the knife. All right, partner. Rex does not move for a full 3 seconds. Then he turns, noses the seam once, and steps aside only halfway, as if granting permission but not trust. Martha presses a hand to her coat. That dog knows more than we do, she murmurs. Ethan does not disagree. He leans in again, but this time he does not cut. He uses the knife handle to press gently at the edge of the split, just enough to move a flake of softened bark. It breaks away with a dry crack and drops into the grass. Underneath, in the narrow dark opening, something catches the last gray light of evening and sends it back in a dull, tired gleam. Not wire. Not a nail. A flat surface. A corner. Manufactured. Hidden. Ethan feels the cold gather more sharply around his hands. Somewhere down the road, an engine begins to climb the hill toward the property, tires whispering over gravel. Sheriff Blake is coming. But out here beneath the oak, with Rex standing guard and the metal just visible inside the wound of the tree, Ethan already knows one thing with terrible certainty. Whatever was placed inside this trunk was never meant to be found by accident. Sheriff Nora Blake arrives with her headlights washing pale gold across the field, and for a moment the old property looks almost ordinary again, just grass, fence posts, and a tree holding the last of the evening. Then she steps out, takes one look at Rex braced beside the trunk and Ethan standing with the utility knife lowered in his hand, and the softness leaves her face. Nora Blake is not a woman who startles easily. At 46, she carries the kind of calm authority small towns learn to trust, not because it is loud, but because it stays. She buttons her dark sheriff's coat against the cold, walks through the grass with measured steps, and stops beside Ethan without speaking. He points the flashlight at the seam and then at the sliver of dull metal glinting beneath the bark. Nora leans in. Her breath clouds once in the air. "That was not grown there," she says quietly. Martha Vale stands a few yards back, grocery sack hanging forgotten at her side, her eyes fixed on the trunk with the weary look of someone watching the past come due. Ethan explains what Rex did, how the dog ignored the ground, how he signaled the exact same spot 3 times, how the bark gave way just enough to reveal a hard corner inside. Nora listens without interruption. Then she looks down at Rex. "Good boy," she says, and Rex does not wag. He only keeps watch. There are moments in law enforcement when procedure feels almost sacred, not because of paperwork, but because it protects truth from being mishandled. Nora radios for Deputy Colin Shaw and asks him to bring an evidence kit, gloves, and the compact hand saw from the cruiser trunk. While they wait, Ethan studies the tree again. The swelling seems even larger in the deepening dark, like a closed fist wrapped in wood. The temperature has dropped into the low 40s now, and the smell of night is settling over the property, pine from the hills, damp soil from the creek bed, and the faint mineral scent that rises off old bark when the air turns cold. Colin arrives breathless and young and trying not to show either. He starts to ask what they found, but the question dies when he sees the seam. Nora puts on gloves. Ethan does the same. Under her direction, he works the edge of the softened bark away a little at a time, careful, patient, letting the tree give up what it has held rather than forcing it open. Each piece falls away with a dry, brittle sound into the grass below. Rex stands close enough that Ethan can feel the dog's warmth against his leg. At last the shape inside becomes clear. It is a small metal box, rectangular, no larger than a hardback book, wrapped so tightly by the oak's growth that the bark has almost made a second skin around it. Colin lets out a breath he had been holding. Martha closes her eyes. Nora tells Ethan to ease it out slowly. It takes both hands and a careful rocking motion to free it from the living wood. When it finally comes loose, the weight of it surprises him. Not heavy like stone. Heavy like something meant to last. The metal is darkened with age, edges dulled, one corner furred with rust, but the latch is still intact. Ethan kneels in the cold grass, sets the box on a clean evidence cloth, and looks up at Nora. She gives one short nod. He opens it. No one speaks. Inside, beneath a faded strip of blue cloth, lies an old silver badge, a small ring of keys, a photograph of a blonde little girl smiling into summer sunlight, and a cassette tape labeled in careful handwriting, "If they find this, tell her I tried." The whole field seems to go still around them. Even Colin, who has not been alive long enough to remember the Burnham fire firsthand, goes pale in the flashlight glow. Martha lifts a trembling hand to her mouth. Nora stares at the badge as if she knows it, or almost knows it, from some locked room in memory. Rex lowers his head toward the open box and exhales once, slow and certain, like a sentry who has finally reached the end of his watch. For a long moment, nobody touches the contents of the box. The flashlight beam trembles faintly in Colin's hand, catching the silver badge, the ring of keys, the little girl's sunlit face, and the careful handwriting on the cassette label as if each object belongs to a different story, and yet all of them have been waiting for the same night. Then Nora bends closer, her expression tightening in a way Ethan has never seen before. She lifts the badge with gloved fingers and turns it toward the light. The metal is worn, but the engraving is still there. Deputy Owen Mercer. Ash Hollow County Sheriff's Office. Ethan looks up at her. You know the name. Nora nods once, slowly. He worked here before my time as sheriff. Left the department not long after the Burnham fire. Officially it was retirement. Unofficially, nobody could ever tell the same version twice. Martha closes her eyes as if that name has been sitting under her tongue for years. Colin shifts beside them, young face pale in the cold. Mercer was the one who signed the final report, he says quietly, remembering it from Academy archive training and old county files. Nora says. Nothing to that. She only picks up the keyring next, studying the tags. Most are plain brass, one smoothed by age, but one still carries a tiny oval marker with faded letters stamped into it. Pump House. Ethan feels something in the night sharpen. The Burnham property used to draw water from a creek-fed structure at the far end of the land, half tool shed, half pump room, tucked near the cottonwoods where the ground stays damp even in August. He has not thought about it in years. Maybe nobody has. Rex has. The dog lifts his head before Ethan says a word, turns from the tree, and looks toward the dark edge of the field as if an invisible line has just connected one secret to another. We go now, Nora says. No one argues. Ethan secures the box, then rises with Rex already moving ahead through the tall grass, not fast, not frantic, but with the solemn certainty of something guiding rather than searching. The beam of their lights cuts across the property in pale white bars. The field falls away into a narrow trail choked with brush and old weeds, then opens toward the creek where the remains of the pump house sit low under leaning cottonwoods. The roof sags. One shutter hangs crooked. The whole structure smells of wet leaves, old wood, and river stone. Yet when Ethan reaches the door, the padlock on it fits the marked key perfectly. The sound it makes turning open is small, almost polite, but it rolls through the dark like a confession. Inside, the air is cold and still. Dust lies thick on the floorboards nearest the door, but farther in, beneath the broken window, the dust is lighter, disturbed long ago and then left to settle again. Ethan sweeps his flashlight across a narrow cot, a folded wool blanket, a child's rain boots lined up neatly side by side, and a wooden crate holding 3 paperback storybooks with softened corners. On the far wall, written in pencil at a child's height, are dates. Not 1 or 2. Dozens. Ethan steps closer, his breath catching before he can stop it. The first date begins 2 days after the fire. The last is almost 7 months later. Beside one of them, in uncertain careful letters, is a name written over and over until the child. Got it right. Not Lila. Not Burnham. Grace. Martha lets out a broken whisper behind him. Colin does not speak at all. Nora stands very still, looking at the wall as if the whole county has shifted beneath her boots. Ethan feels Rex press close at his side, warm and steady in the cold room, and in that silence the truth arrives with terrible gentleness. The little girl in the photograph did not die in that fire. She lived here afterward, hidden in the dark, while the town believed Ash was the end of her story. The room feels smaller after that, as if the truth itself has taken up space. Ethan keeps his light on the pencil marks while Nora kneels beside the crate and opens one of the storybooks with careful gloved hands. Inside the front cover, written in neat adult print, are 2 names. Grace Mercer on one line. Grace Holloway on the next. Colin stares at it, then at the wall, then back at Nora as though the county he grew up in has just shifted under his feet. Martha lowers herself onto the edge of the cot without meaning to, her grocery sack slipping to the floor beside her boots, apples rolling softly against old boards. He hid her, she whispers. Owen hid her here. Nora rises slowly, the cassette tape still sealed in its evidence sleeve, and for the first time that night her voice carries something beyond control. It carries grief. Not just hid her. Protected her. Ethan looks around the pump house again, This time not as a ruin but as a refuge built out of fear and limited choices. The folded blanket. The rain boots. The books. A chipped blue cup on the shelf beside a child's brush with two pale hairs still caught in the bristles. Nothing here speaks of cruelty. Everything speaks of urgency, secrecy, and a man trying to keep one frightened little girl alive long enough for something better to reach her. They returned to the sheriff's office just after 8, bringing the box, the key ring, the photograph, and the silence of the pump house back with them. Outside, the town square glows under yellow street lamps and the diner windows shine warm against the cold, but inside the evidence room the air is sharp with old paper, coffee gone stale, and the hum of fluorescent lights. Nora authorizes the cassette to be digitized immediately. Ethan stands beside her with Rex lying at his boots, head on his paws, as the tape begins to turn. At first there is only static, then breathing, then the low strained voice of a man trying not to run out of time. Owen Mercer. Older than Ethan expected. Tired. Honest in the way only desperate people are honest. He says the fire was never the whole story. He says the child survived, and he could not leave her where she would be found by the same people who had already lied once. He says he trusted no one inside the county office after the report was changed, after names disappeared from statements, after the case was hurried shut. So he took her, hid her, fed her, waited. And when he finally found a retired social worker in Missoula willing to place the girl quietly with relatives under a different surname, he sent her away with papers that could not be traced back to Ash Hollow. Near the end of the tape, his voice breaks for the first time. "If this is being heard," he says, "then I did not make it long enough to tell her myself. Her name was Lila Burnham. But the name she chose when she was old enough to speak without shaking was Grace. Tell her I kept the promise. Tell her she was loved every day I had her." No one in the room moves when the tape clicks off. Nora wipes at one eye and immediately straightens, as if surprised by her own tears. Colin is already at the county records terminal, cross-checking old adoption filings, social security changes, and a sealed guardianship document Mercer's tape has finally made lawful to reopen. It takes less than 20 minutes to find the thread. Grace Holloway. 30 years old. Elementary music teacher. Living 2 counties south in Bozeman. Ethan looks down at Rex, whose eyes are open now, steady and bright in the artificial light, and feels the strange mercy of it wash through him. The dog had not led them to a grave. He had led them to a life. By mid-morning the next day, the road to Bozeman lies under a pale wash of sun, with frost still clinging to the fence lines and the mountains standing far off like quiet witnesses. Ethan drives with Rex in the back seat and Sheriff Nora Blake beside him, the evidence case secured between them, the photograph and cassette copies inside. None of them speak much. Some truths make noise on the way in. Others arrive like weather, steady and impossible to hurry. Grace Holloway is waiting for them in the front office of Cottonwood Elementary when they arrive, a woman of 30 with light hair pulled back at the nape of her neck and the kind of open, gentle-faced children trust on sight. There is a piano somewhere down the hall, soft scales rising and falling behind a closed classroom door, and the whole building smells faintly of crayons, coffee, and floor wax. Grace stands when Ethan and Nora step inside. Her eyes go first to the badge case in Nora's hands, then to Rex. Something in her expression changes at once, not recognition exactly, but a strange stillness, as if some locked room inside her has just heard a key turn. They sit with her in a small conference room with winter sunlight falling across the table. Nora speaks carefully. Ethan watches Grace's face as the story unfolds, the old fire, the hidden box, the pump house, the tape. At first Grace listens the way people listen when they are being told about someone else's life. Then Nora places the photograph on the table. The little girl in summer light. Blonde hair caught by the wind. Bare knees, wide smile, a ribbon crooked on one shoulder. Grace looks down, and all the color leaves her face. Her hand rises slowly to her mouth. "I have dreamed about that dress," she says, voice barely above a whisper. "Not the whole picture. Just the blue." When they play the tape, she does not move at all. Owen Mercer's tired voice fills the room, and with every word Grace seems to grow both older and younger, a woman listening, a child remembering. By the time the message reaches the line about love, tears are already running down her cheeks, quiet and unhidden. She closes her eyes and lets the silence after the tape settle over her like a blanket she has needed all her life. "I always knew someone saved me," she says at last. "I just never knew who paid the price for keeping me safe." 2 days later, Grace comes back to Ash Hollow with them. The town meets her gently, as if even the buildings understand this is not a day for spectacle. Martha Vale stands waiting by the old Burnham property in her brown coat, both hands resting on her cane, and when Grace steps out of the cruiser, the old woman begins to cry before a single word is spoken. The field is quiet under a silver afternoon sky. The oak still stands near the ruined walk, broad and weathered, its open trunk no longer looking menacing now, only tired, as if it has finally released what it was asked to guard. Grace walks to it slowly. Ethan keeps back with Nora and Martha, Rex seated at his side, ears forward, watchful but calm. Grace places her palm against the bark where the growth had been cut away and leaves it there a long time. No one interrupts her. The creek moves softly beyond the cottonwoods. Dry leaves skitter over the ground. A crow calls once from somewhere uphill. Then Grace smiles through tears and says the words as if they have crossed years to find the right place to land. He kept his promise. Ethan feels Rex lean lightly against his leg, solid and warm, and in that small pressure there is something like a blessing. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just true. A faithful dog had barked at an old wound in a tree, and because he refused to walk away, a lost child was given back her name, a weary town was given back its conscience, and one forgotten man was finally given the dignity of being remembered for the good he carried in secret. Some miracles do not come like thunder. Sometimes they arrive on 4 steady paws, stand before the silence, and wait until the truth is ready to be heard.